The morning light came soft through the pines, filtered gold through needles still wet with dew. Officer Marlowe Quinn stood at the window of her cabin, coffee cooling in her hand, watching the Oregon wilderness wake up. The forest stretched endless before her, a wall of green that swallowed the horizon. Somewhere out there, deer were moving through the underbrush. Hawks circled high above the canopy. The world turned without her, the way it always had, the way it always would. She didn't mind the solitude anymore. She'd chosen it. On the small table behind her, a photograph sat in a simple frame. Her father, Sergeant James Quinn, in his uniform. K-9 handler, 23 years of service. The dog beside him in the photo, a Belgian Malinois named Ranger, sat with the same rigid discipline her father had carried in every step of his life. The photo was taken 6 months before the heart attack. 6 months before Marlowe's world had fractured down the middle. She turned away from the window, set the coffee down, checked her duty belt, her radio, her boots. The routine was muscle memory now. Gear up, get in the patrol car, drive the empty roads, come home, repeat. It was a life stripped down to its bones, and that suited her fine. Out here, she didn't have to explain herself, didn't have to answer questions about how she was doing, whether she'd thought about grief counseling, if she was ready to move on yet. Move on, as if grief worked on a schedule. The radio crackled to life as she climbed into her patrol vehicle. Dispatch's voice flat and professional. Unit 12 routine patrol requested on Forest Route 12. Standard checkpoint sweep. Marlowe keyed the mic. Unit 12, copy that. En route. Route 12. The loneliest stretch of road in the county. 50 miles of two-lane blacktop cutting through old grove forest barely used except by the occasional logging truck or lost tourist. No traffic, no emergencies, no chaos. Just trees and silence, and the occasional deer crossing. Her father used to say the quiet routes were where you learned to think, where the noise of the world fell away and you could hear what mattered. She'd requested this route 6 months ago, the day after the funeral. The patrol car hummed down the winding road, tires crunching over gravel and pine needles. Fog clung to the low places thick as cotton, turning the world into something soft and distant. Marlowe kept her eyes on the road, on the rhythm of yellow lines disappearing under the hood. The radio played low, just static, and the occasional dispatch call for other units in other parts of the county. Not her problem, not her world. A shape moved at the edge of her vision. Marlowe's foot eased off the gas. The car slowed. She leaned forward, squinting through the windshield. There in the center of the road. Small, dark against the pale asphalt. Not moving. Her first thought was deer. They froze sometimes when, startled, became statues in the headlights. But this shape was too small, too low to the ground. She brought the car to a stop 20 yards away, engine idling, and reached for her binoculars. A dog. No. A puppy. German Shepherd, maybe 4 months old, sitting perfectly still in the middle of the road, staring directly at her car. Not running, not barking, just watching. Marlowe lowered the binoculars, frowned. Dogs didn't just appear out here. This far from town, this deep in the forest, you didn't see strays, you didn't see pets. The nearest house was 15 miles back. The nearest campground, closed for the season, was 10 miles ahead. She put the car in park, left it running, and stepped out. The puppy didn't move. Easy now, Marlowe called, voice soft. She kept her hands visible, her movements slow. Protocol for approaching an unknown animal. Don't startle it. Don't threaten it. Let it decide whether you're safe. But the puppy wasn't acting scared. Wasn't acting like a lost animal at all. It sat with an eerie stillness. Head tilted slightly, eyes locked on her. Studying her. Waiting for something. Marlowe took 3 steps forward. The puppy's ears pricked, but it held its ground. Another 3 steps. Close enough now to see details. The pup was male coat, a mix of black and tan, classic shepherd coloring, but his fur was matted, caked with dirt and something darker. Blood, maybe. His paws were scraped raw, pink flesh visible where the pads had been torn, and around his neck a faint red line where a collar had been recently removed. Not gently removed, ripped off. Marlowe's chest tightened. "Hey, buddy," she murmured, crouching down to make herself smaller. "Where'd you come from?" The puppy tilted his head the other way. Then deliberately he stood, turned 90 degrees to the left, looked back at her over his shoulder, took one step toward the tree line, stopped, looked back again. Marlowe blinked. That wasn't random behavior, that was communication. He was showing her something, asking her to follow. She glanced around. The road stretched empty in both directions. Forest on both sides, dense and quiet. No signs of human presence. No vehicles. No campers. Nothing that explained why a puppy would be out here alone injured, behaving like he had a mission. She keyed her radio. "Dispatch Unit 12, I've got a possible stray on Route 12, mile marker 47. Young German Shepherd appears injured, requesting animal control." Static hissed back at her. She tried again. "Dispatch, do you copy?" Nothing. The radio was dead. Too deep in the valley. The signal always got spotty out here, but usually she could get through. Not today. Marlowe straightened, looked at the puppy. He was still watching her, still waiting. Those eyes, brown and deep and far too aware for such a young dog. They held something she recognized. Desperation. The kind that came when words weren't enough, when you needed someone to understand without being told. Her father's voice echoed in her memory clear, as if he were standing beside her. "Dogs see souls, Marlowe. They know who to trust. When one chooses you, you listen." The puppy took another step toward the trees, stopped, looked back. Marlowe made a decision she couldn't explain even to herself. She walked back to the patrol car, grabbed her pack, her flashlight, and a bottle of water, locked the doors, and followed the puppy into the forest. The transition from road to wilderness was immediate. One step she was on pavement, next she was pushing through ferns taller than her waist. The puppy moved ahead of her, not running but not slow either. A deliberate pace, checking every few yards to make sure she was still behind him. His movements were trained, controlled. This wasn't a panicked animal fleeing danger. This was something else entirely. The forest swallowed them. Light dimmed under the canopy, turned green and soft. The air smelled of earth and rot and growing things. No sounds but her boots on the undergrowth and the puppy's soft panting ahead. Even the birds seemed to have gone quiet, as if the woods themselves were holding their breath. Marlowe's hand drifted to her duty belt, not to her gun, just touching it. A reminder that she was still a cop, still trained, still capable, but the gesture felt hollow. Out here, her badge meant nothing. Her radio didn't work. She was alone with a puppy she didn't know, walking deeper into terrain she couldn't map, following an instinct she couldn't name. 20 minutes in this terrain shifted. The ground sloped downward, uneven and damp. Marlowe's boots sank into soft earth, left deep impressions. She knelt, shone her flashlight on the ground. Tracks, paw prints, small ones, the puppies heading in the direction they were moving, but also larger ones. Adult dog, German Shepherd-sized, fresh within the last day or two. The prints were pressed deep, heavier on the front paws, as if the animal had been favoring its hind legs. Injured, maybe, or carrying something. And beside the paw prints, another set. Human. Boot prints. Size 11 deep tread. Recent. Very recent. Marlowe's pulse quickened. She swept the light in a wider circle. More prints. A second set of human tracks, smaller. Size 9. Two people and a dog moving through the forest not long ago. She stood, scanned the trees, saw nothing, heard nothing. But the air felt different now. Charged. Wrong. The puppy had stopped ahead, waiting. When she looked at him, he whined, soft, pleading, then turned and moved faster. Marlowe followed, adrenaline sharpening her senses. Training kicked in. Watch your surroundings. Mark your route. Stay alert. But part of her, the part That sounded like her father said something else. Trust the dog. He knows. 5 minutes later, the puppy stopped abruptly. Marlowe almost stumbled into him. He was standing rigid, nose pointed at something on the ground ahead. His whole body vibrated with tension. Marlowe approached slowly, shone her light down. A collar. K9 training collar, expensive professional grade. The buckle was broken, not worn through, snapped, forced off. She picked it up carefully, turned it over. On the inside, faded but readable, a number stitched into the leather. K9-447. Marlowe's throat went dry. This wasn't a pet collar. This was gear from a training facility. K9 units use these. Police, military, search and rescue, professional working dogs. She looked at the puppy. He was watching her, trembling now. Not from cold, from something deeper. "You're not just lost, are you?" she whispered. The puppy's ears flattened. He took a step back, then another, leading her again. But this time there was something different in his movement. Something urgent, frantic. Marlowe pocketed the collar and followed. The forest grew denser. Branches clawed at her jacket. Thorns caught her pants. The puppy pushed through without hesitation, and Marlowe struggled to keep up. Her radio crackled occasionally, bursts of static that sounded almost like voices but never clear, never connected. Then the puppy stopped at a small clearing and began to dig. Not random digging, focused, desperate. His front paws tore into the soft earth, flinging dirt behind him. He whined between breaths, high and sharp, a sound that cut through the silence like a blade. "Hey, easy," Marlowe said, kneeling beside him. "Let me help." She pushed him gently aside and dug where he'd started. The soil was loose, recently disturbed. Within seconds, her fingers hit something that wasn't earth. Fabric. She brushed the dirt away carefully. A harness. K9 working harness. Black nylon heavy-duty buckles, reflective strips. And on the chest panel, clear as day, a patch. Athena, narcotics detection K9. Marlowe's breath stopped. She pulled the harness free, held it up. It was torn on one side, the stitching ripped. And across the chest, darkening the black fabric, were stains she recognized immediately. Blood, not old, not fresh, somewhere in between. The puppy pressed his nose against the harness and let out a sound that broke something inside Marlowe. Not a bark, not a whine, a cry, pure and raw and grieving. "Athena," Marlowe said softly, reading the name again. This belonged to Athena. The puppy looked up at her with eyes that begged her to understand what he couldn't say. Marlowe turned the harness over, examining it. The blood was concentrated near the ribs, a wound there maybe. The tears in the fabric suggested force, struggle. Someone had removed this harness and they hadn't been gentle about it. She scanned the clearing, more signs now that she was looking. Scuff marks in the dirt, broken branches, a pattern of disturbed earth leading away from the burial spot. Someone had buried the harness here, hidden it, tried to erase evidence. But evidence of what? The puppy tugged at her pant leg with his teeth, gentle but insistent. He pulled her toward the edge of the clearing where the disturbed earth continued in a faint trail. Drag marks. Something heavy had been pulled through here. Recently. Marlowe's stomach turned cold. She stood harness still in her hand and keyed her radio one more time. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12. I have a possible crime scene, Forest Road 12 vicinity. Need immediate backup in K9 unit contact. Do you copy?" Static. Endless static. She was alone. No backup, no communication, and a puppy at her feet who was leading her towards something she wasn't sure she wanted to find. The smart move was to turn back, mark the location, return to the car, drive until she got signal and call it in. Protocol, procedure, safety. But the puppy was looking at her with those eyes. And Marlowe heard her father's voice again, from a lifetime ago, from a different world. "Sometimes the job isn't in the manual, kid. Sometimes you just have to do what's right, even when it scares you." She knelt down, met the puppy's gaze. "Okay," she said quietly. "Show me. Show me what you've been trying to tell me. The puppy's tail lifted slightly. Not a wag, just acknowledgement. He turned and trotted toward the drag marks, following the trail deeper into the forest. And Marlowe followed him, harness gripped tight in one hand, flashlight in the other, walking into the unknown. Because a puppy had asked her to, and something in her couldn't say no. The trail wound through terrain that grew rougher with every step. The puppy moved with increasing urgency, now his small body pushing through obstacles that should have stopped him. Fallen logs twice his height, thorn bushes that tore at his already damaged paws, streams swollen with recent rain. He navigated it all with a single-minded determination that Marlowe found both heartbreaking and awe-inspiring. This puppy, 4 months old, injured, exhausted, was on a mission, and nothing would stop him. They'd been walking for nearly an hour when Marlowe noticed the blood. Droplets on leaves, smears on tree bark. Not a lot. Not a trail you'd see unless you were looking. But enough to tell a story. An injured animal had come through here, moving but struggling. The spacing of the blood drops suggested a gait that was uneven. Limping, dragging something. The puppy sniffed at each spot, whined, and moved faster. Marlowe's legs burned from the climb. They were ascending now, following a ridge that overlooked a narrow valley. The forest here was old-growth trees, so tall their tops vanished into mist. The silence was absolute, broken only by her breathing and the soft padding of the puppy's paws. Then she saw the fabric, caught on a thorn bush fluttering in the slight breeze, a strip of dark material torn and stained. Marlowe approached carefully, pulled it free. Canvas, heavy duty, the kind used for tactical gear, and on one edge, barely visible, a logo, Pacific K9 Training Facility. Her heart hammered. Pacific K9, she knew that name, one of the premier working dog training centers on the West Coast. Police departments, military units, private security, they all sourced dogs from Pacific. These weren't pets. These were elite animals worth tens of thousands of dollars, trained for years. And one of them, Athena, was out here. Hurt. Hidden. Why? The puppy barked. Sharp. Insistent. He was 20 yards ahead now, standing at the base of an enormous Douglas fir, looking back at her with wild eyes. Marlowe jogged to catch up. When she reached him, he darted around the tree, disappeared from view. She followed, stepped around the massive trunk, and stopped dead. Claw marks. Deep gouges in the bark running vertically for 4 feet. The kind a large dog would make, trying to gain purchase, trying to climb or hold position. And at the base of the tree, pressed into the soft earth, a pool of blood. Not drops, not smears. A pool, dark and congealed and far too much. Marlowe's training screamed at her. This was a crime scene. She should retreat, preserve evidence, call it in. But her radio was useless, and the puppy was already moving again, following something she couldn't see, but he clearly could. Scent. He was tracking scent. She pushed through the underbrush after him, branches whipping her face, thorns catching her jacket. The puppy was running now, small legs pumping breath, coming in gasps. He was exhausted but refused to stop, refused to slow down. And then through the trees ahead, Marlowe saw it, a structure. Man-made, weathered gray wood that blended almost perfectly with the forest around it. An abandoned cabin roof, sagging windows, broken walls covered in moss and creeping vines. It looked like something from another era, a relic from when logging camps dotted these mountains. Long forgotten, slowly being reclaimed by the wilderness. But someone had been here recently. The path leading to the front porch was disturbed. Boot prints in the mud. Fresh ones, and tire tracks barely visible under fallen leaves cutting through the brush to a spot where a vehicle had been parked. Recently, within days. The puppy stopped 10 feet from the cabin and went completely still. Every muscle in his small body locked tight, his ears flattened against his skull, his tail tucked. And for the first time since Marlowe had met him, he looked terrified. She approached slowly, crouched beside him. "What is it, buddy? What's in there?" The puppy whimpered, pressed himself against her leg, refused to go closer. Marlowe's hand moved to her service weapon. She drew it, held it low and ready, cleared her throat. "This is Officer Quinn with the county police. If anyone's inside, make yourself known." Silence. No response. No movement. She tried again louder. "I'm armed. Come out slowly with your hands visible." Nothing. The cabin stared back at her with empty window eyes. Dead. Abandoned. But the puppy's fear was real. Something in there had traumatized him. Something he didn't want to face again. Marlowe made a choice. She holstered her weapon, pulled out her phone instead. No signal as expected, but the camera still worked. She photographed the tire tracks, the boot prints, the exterior of the cabin. Evidence. Documentation. If something happened to her, at least there'd be a record. Then she reached down and gently touched the puppy's head. "You've been so brave," she whispered. "But I need you to wait here, okay? Just for a minute. Can you do that?" The puppy looked up at her with eyes that said he understood and hated it. But he sat, trembling, watching, trusting her to come back. Marlowe straightened, drew her weapon again, and approached the cabin. The porch steps groaned under her weight, wood soft with rot. The door hung crooked on rusted hinges, half open like a mouth frozen mid-scream. She pushed it wider with her boot. The interior was dark, lit only by shafts of light piercing through holes in the roof and cracks in the walls. Dust floated in the beams, thick and lazy. The air smelled of mold and decay, and something underneath it all, something metallic. Blood. Marlowe's eyes adjusted to the dimness. She saw the remains of furniture. A table collapsed in one corner. Chairs scattered, shelves that had rotted and fallen, and along the walls, newer additions. Metal crates, empty now but recently used. She could see where they'd sat, indentations in the dust. 5 of them, large enough for dogs. On the floor near the crates, she found more evidence. Dog food bowls, industrial size, and medical supplies. Empty syringes, bottles of sedatives, bandages. This wasn't someone camping. This was a holding facility. Someone had been keeping dogs here. Multiple dogs. Marlowe's jaw clenched. Puppy mills, illegal breeders, dogfighting operations. Her mind cycled through possibilities, each one worse than the last. She moved deeper into the cabin weapon, raised checking corners. One room, small, nothing in the shadows, nothing hiding. But on the floor near the back wall, she found something that made her blood run cold. A phone, shattered screen, cracked casing, but still intact enough that she could see the lock screen when she picked it up. A photograph. A German shepherd, beautiful and strong, lying on a blanket with 8 tiny puppies clustered around her. The image was dated 4 weeks ago, and across the bottom in white text someone had written, "Week 2, all healthy, ready soon." Marlowe's hands shook as she pressed the power button. The phone was dead, battery drained. But this was evidence. Proof. She pocketed it carefully, already planning how to get it charged, accessed, searched. A sound outside made her freeze. Not the puppy. Something else. Movement. Footsteps. She moved to the window, peered through the broken glass. The puppy was still where she'd left him, but he was standing now, rigid, ears forward, staring into the forest to the east. Then Marlowe heard it. Voices, distant, 2 people talking, getting closer. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She moved quickly, quietly back to the door, slipped outside, grabbed the puppy, who didn't resist, just pressed himself into her arms. She carried him around the side of the cabin, ducked behind a pile of rotting lumber, and waited. The voices grew clearer. Men, 2 of them. "Told you we should have burned it." "Boss said no fires, draws attention." So does leaving evidence. Footsteps on the porch, the groan of the door opening wider. "Check the back. Make sure we didn't leave anything." "It's been 3 days. If cops were coming, they'd be here by now." "Just check." Marlowe held her breath, held the puppy tight against her chest. His heart was hammering as fast as hers. Through a gap in the lumber, she could see two figures enter the cabin, both male, both wearing dark jackets, jeans work boots, one tall, broad-shouldered, one shorter, wiry. She couldn't see their faces, but she didn't need to. These were the men who'd been here, who'd used this cabin, who'd had something to do with whatever happened to Athena, and they'd come back. The puppy whimpered, barely audible. Marlowe covered his muzzle gently with her hand, whispered into his ear. Shh, quiet, please. He went still, like he understood, like he knew their lives depended on silence. Inside the cabin, the men were moving things. She heard scraping, muttering, a curse. Did you find it? No, maybe an animal dragged it off. The harness was buried. Animals don't bury things and then unbury them. Silence. Then quieter, more dangerous. You think someone's been here? I don't know, but I don't like it. What do we tell the boss? Nothing. We clean this up and we're done. The shipment's already moved. The evidence is gone. Let it go. Marlowe's mind raced. Shipment. Evidence. This was organized. Professional. Not just animal abuse. Trafficking. The door creaked. Footsteps on the porch. Let's go. We'll come back tonight with the truck. Load everything. Burn the cabin. Finally, two sets of boots on the steps. Walking away. Fading into the forest. Marlowe waited. Counted to 60. Then 60 again. When she was sure they were gone, she carefully stood puppy still in her arms and moved out from behind the lumber. The cabin was empty again, but now she knew. This wasn't abandoned, it was active. And whatever operation had been running here, it wasn't over. She looked down at the puppy. His dark eyes stared up at her, trust and terror mixed in equal measure. Okay, she whispered. Now we really need to get out of here. But the puppy squirmed in her arms. Not to escape, to be put down. She set him gently on the ground, and immediately he trotted toward the far side of the cabin to a spot she hadn't explored yet. A thick tangle of brush and fallen branches that looked impenetrable. The puppy nosed at the branches, whined, looked back at her. Marlowe's stomach sank. No, she said quietly. Please, no. But she moved forward anyway, knelt beside him, started pulling branches aside. Beneath the brush was a gap, a crawl space under the cabin, dark and tight and thick with the smell of earth and blood. The puppy crawled into it without hesitation, and Marlowe, though every instinct screamed at her to run, to leave, to get help before going any further, followed him into the darkness. The crawl space swallowed them whole. Marlowe pressed herself flat against the cold earth flashlight gripped between her teeth, pulling herself forward on her elbows. The puppy was ahead of her, just a shadow in the narrow beam of light, moving with purpose through a space that seemed designed to crush the breath from her lungs. Dirt fell into her hair. Cobwebs caught her face. The smell was overwhelming, thick and wrong. Rot and copper and something else, something that made her lizard brain scream at her to turn back, to get out, to run. But the puppy kept going. So she did too. The space opened slightly, enough that Marlowe could lift her head, sweep the flashlight beam in an arc. The underside of the cabin was a nightmare of sagging beams and settled foundation stones. Water had pooled in the low spots, black and stagnant. Insects scattered from the light. And in the far corner, pressed against the foundation, she saw the crates. Not the metal ones from inside. These were wooden, old, handmade from rough-cut lumber. There were 3 of them stacked and shoved into the darkest part of the crawl space. The puppy sat in front of them, whining softly, pawing at the nearest one. Marlowe crawled closer, flashlight revealing details that made her chest tighten. The crates had been opened recently, lids pried off, nails scattered in the dirt, and inside each one, pressed down and tangled, were blankets. Stained blankets. Dogs had been kept in these crates, recently, for long enough to leave their mark. She reached into the nearest one, pulled out a blanket. Caught in the fibers, she found tufts of fur, German Shepherd coloring, black and tan, multiple shades suggesting multiple dogs. The puppy whimpered again, more urgently. He wasn't looking at the crates anymore. He was staring past them into the deepest shadow where Marlowe's light hadn't yet reached. She redirected the beam, and her heart stopped. In the corner, partially hidden behind the last crate, was a shape. Large, dark, unmoving. No, Marlowe scrambled forward, heedless now of the dirt, the tight space, the insects. She shoved the crate aside with strength she didn't know she had, and the flashlight beam fell fully on what had been hidden. A dog, an adult German shepherd, lying on her side. So still that for one terrible moment Marlowe was certain she was looking at a corpse. Then the dog's ribs moved, shallow, barely visible, but movement. She was alive. "Oh, God," Marlowe breathed. "Oh, God, you're alive." She dropped to her knees in the dirt, hands already moving, checking, assessing. The dog was unconscious or close to it. Her breathing was labored, each inhale a struggle. Her fur was matted with mud and blood, and things Marlowe didn't want to identify. One of her hind legs was twisted at an angle that made Marlowe's stomach turn. Broken or dislocated, impossible to tell in this light. But it was the wound on her flank that drew Marlowe's attention. A deep gash running from ribs to hip. The bleeding had slowed, clotted, but the injury was severe. Without medical attention, infection would set in, was probably already setting in. The puppy squeezed past Marlowe and pressed himself against the dog's head. He licked her muzzle gently, whine-pawed at her ear, trying to wake her, trying to get a response. The dog's eyes fluttered, opened halfway, dark and clouded with pain. But when she saw the puppy, something changed. Her eyes focused, cleared just slightly, and her tail, caked with dirt and pressed against the ground, moved. One weak thump against the earth. Recognition. Marlowe's throat closed. "Athena," she whispered. "Your name is Athena." The dog's gaze shifted from the puppy to Marlowe, studied her, and in those eyes Marlowe saw something that broke her completely. Not fear, not aggression. Gratitude. Relief, the look of someone who had been fighting alone for so long and had finally found help. "I've got you," Marlowe said, voice shaking. "I've got both of you. You're safe now." But even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. They weren't safe. Not here. Not in a crawl space under a cabin that would be burned tonight. Not with two men somewhere into the forest who would return. Not with a critically injured dog who couldn't walk and a puppy who couldn't defend himself. Marlowe pulled off her jacket, draped it carefully over Athena. The dog was cold body temperature dropping. Shock probably. Blood loss. Dehydration. Every second they stayed here made it worse. She tried her radio again, pulled it from her belt, keyed the mic. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12. I have a medical emergency. Critically injured K9. Need immediate assistance. Do you copy?" Static, pure, and absolute. She was on her own. Marlowe sat back on her heels, mind racing. The men had said they'd return tonight. That gave her hours. Maybe. But Athena couldn't wait hours. And Marlowe couldn't carry a 50-pound injured dog through 2 miles of forest in daylight, let alone attempt it in darkness. But staying meant being found. And being found meant questions she couldn't answer. Men who'd hidden a dog, who'd run an illegal operation, who were willing to burn evidence they wouldn't hesitate to eliminate a witness. The puppy nuzzled Marlowe's hand, looked up at her with eyes that said he'd brought her this far. Done his part. Now it was her turn. "Okay," Marlowe said quietly. "Okay, first things first." She pulled her pack around, dug through the contents. First aid kit, limited, meant for human injuries, but it would have to do. Water bottle, energy bars, a space blanket, not much, but something. She uncapped the water bottle, poured a small amount onto her hand, held it near Athena's muzzle. The dog's tongue came out dry and cracked, lapped weakly at the moisture. Marlowe gave her more, little by little, careful not to let her choke. Next, the wound. Marlowe cleaned it as best she could with water and gauze from her kit. Athena whimpered, muscles tensing, but she didn't snap, didn't pull away, just endured with a stoicism that spoke of training discipline and a pain threshold far beyond normal. "I'm sorry," Marlowe murmured. "I'm so sorry. I know it hurts." The leg was next. Dislocated, she was almost certain. Marlowe used the space blanket, tore it into strips, wrapped the leg as gently as possible to keep it immobile. Athena's breathing grew more labored. Her eyes drifted closed again. No, Marlowe said sharply. Stay with me. Stay awake. She rubbed Athena's chest, stimulating circulation. The puppy joined in licking his mother's face, pawing at her. Together they kept her conscious. Barely. The light coming through the gaps in the foundation was starting to change, shifting from the bright white of midday toward the gold of late afternoon. She needed to move. Now. Marlowe closed her eyes, thought of her father. What would he do, James Quinn, who'd spent 2 decades handling canines, who'd trained dogs to trust him in impossible situations, who'd once told her that the secret wasn't strength, it was patience. Work with them, not against them, he'd said. They want to survive as much as you do. Marlowe opened her eyes, looked at Athena. Can you help me? She asked softly. Can you try? The dog's eyes opened, met hers, and something passed between them. Understanding. Agreement. Marlowe positioned herself at Athena's back, slid her arms under the dog's chest, in hindquarters carefully avoiding the injured leg. She lifted. Athena's weight settled against her, and the dog's front paws scrabbled weakly, trying to find purchase, trying to help. Together, inch by agonizing inch, they moved toward the crawl space exit. The puppy led the way, looking back constantly, encouraging with small yips and whines. It took 20 minutes to cover 15 feet. By the time Marlowe emerged into the open air, her arms were screaming, her back was on fire, and tears were streaming down her face. But Athena was out. Lying on the ground beside the cabin, breathing hard but alive. Marlowe collapsed beside her, chest heaving. The puppy curled against Athena's neck, and for a moment the three of them just lay there exhausted. Then Marlowe heard it. In the distance, a sound that made ice flood her veins. An engine. She scrambled to her feet, looked toward the tree line. Saw nothing yet, but the sound was unmistakable. A vehicle coming closer. The access road she'd seen earlier, the tire track, someone was using it. They were coming back. Early. Panic hit like a physical blow. She looked at Athena, at the puppy, at the forest surrounding them. No time to reach her patrol car. No time to hide their presence. The disturbed ground, the tracks she'd made, it was obvious someone had been here. Her eyes fell on a thick stand of brush 30 yards from the cabin, dense enough to provide cover. If she could get Athena there, if they stayed silent, maybe the men wouldn't search. Maybe they'd just do what they came to do and leave. It was a terrible plan, but it was the only one she had. Marlowe knelt, gathered Athena into her arms again. The dog whimpered but didn't resist. Using every ounce of strength she had left, Marlowe half carried, half dragged her toward the brush. The puppy followed silent now, sensing the danger. She pushed into the thick vegetation, thorns tearing at her uniform branches, catching her hair. When she was deep enough that she couldn't see the cabin anymore, she lowered Athena to the ground, covered her with leaves and debris, trying to camouflage them. The puppy pressed against Marlowe's side. She wrapped an arm around him, held him close, and whispered into his ear, "Not a sound, no matter what. Understand?" His body trembled, but he didn't make a noise. The engine sound grew louder, closer, then stopped. Doors opened, slammed shut. Voices, the same ones from before. "Did you bring the bab? In the back, 5 gallons. Should be enough. Let's make this quick. I want to be gone before dark." Footsteps, moving around the cabin. Marlowe's heart hammered so hard she was certain they could hear it. She pressed her free hand over Athena's muzzle, gentle but firm. The dog's eyes were open, aware, terrified but trusting. More sounds, splashing. The sharp chemical smell of gasoline drifted through the air. They were dousing the cabin, preparing to burn it. "Wait," one of the voices, sharp, alert. "You see that? What? Tracks, fresh ones. Someone's been here." Silence. Then the sound of footsteps. Closer now, coming toward the brush where Marlowe hid. She reached slowly for her service weapon. Drew it, held it ready. The footsteps stopped 10 feet away. She could see the man's boots through gaps in the vegetation. Work boots, size 11, the same prints she'd found earlier. Probably a deer, the other voice called from farther away. These aren't deer tracks. The man closer to her knelt examining the ground. These are human, fresh, within the last hour. Marlowe's finger moved to the trigger. If he found them, if he came closer, she'd have no choice. She was a cop. They were criminals, but there were two of them, and she had an injured dog and a puppy to protect. The math was brutal and simple. You think someone's still here? The second voice nervous now. The first man stood. Marlowe could see him through the leaves, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark jacket. His hand went to his waistband. When it came back, he was holding a pistol. Could be law enforcement. Could be hikers. Either way, we burn it and go. Now. What if they saw something? Then they're witnesses, and we deal with witnesses. The casual way he said it made Marlowe's blood turn to ice. These weren't small-time criminals. These were people who'd killed before or were prepared to. The man turned, walked back toward the cabin. Marlowe released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. The sound of splashing resumed, then a lighter sparking. Once, twice, 3 times. A whoosh, the sound of flames catching. Through the brush, Marlowe saw orange light bloom. Smoke began to rise thick and black. The cabin was burning. Let's go. Stay on the access road. If anyone's out here, the fire will flush them out. Doors slamming, engine starting. The vehicle pulled away, but slowly. Searching. Marlowe stayed frozen, arm around the puppy, hand on Athena. Minutes passed. The smoke grew thicker, began to drift into their hiding spot. Athena's breathing grew worse, labored and wet-sounding. Finally, the engine sound faded completely. Gone. Marlowe waited another 5 minutes, then carefully released the puppy and Athena. She stood, every muscle protesting, and looked toward the cabin. It was fully engulfed now, flames reaching toward the darkening sky. The entire structure would be ash within the hour. All evidence gone, except for the bush she'd pulled from underneath it, and the phone in her pocket, and the harness still stuffed in her pack. She had evidence. She had witnesses. But first, she had to get them out of here alive. Marlowe knelt beside Athena again. The dog's eyes were barely open now. Her breathing had deteriorated, shallow and rapid. Shock was setting in fully. Without medical attention, soon she wouldn't survive the night. Okay, Marlowe said, more to herself than to the dogs. Okay, we're doing this. She pulled out her jacket, laid it flat on the ground. Using it as a makeshift sling, she positioned it under Athena's torso. Then, gripping the sleeve, she created a harness she could use to drag the dog. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't comfortable, but it would work. The puppy watched with anxious eyes as Marlowe tested her grip, made sure the jacket would hold. Then she looked down at him. I need you to lead us out, she said. Can you do that? Can you remember the way? The puppy's ears perked. He barked once, soft and certain, then turned and trotted toward the tree line. Marlowe lifted the jacket sling, felt Athena's weight settle, and began to walk. The journey that had taken an hour to make in daylight became a nightmare in the gathering dusk. Marlowe's arms burned within the first 10 minutes. Her shoulders felt like they were tearing from their sockets. Her back screamed with every step, but she didn't stop. The puppy stayed ahead, checking the path, finding the easiest route. When they encountered an obstacle, a fallen log, a steep incline, he'd circle back, bark softly, show her an alternate way. He was guiding her the way he'd been trained, to the way his genetics demanded. Athena drifted in and out of consciousness. Sometimes she'd whimper. Sometimes she'd try to help, her front paws scrabbling against the ground. But mostly she just endured, trusting Marlowe to save her the way she'd once tried to save her puppy. Darkness fell. Marlowe pulled out her flashlight, clamped it between her teeth again. The beam bounced with every step, making shadows dance and twist. The forest became alien, hostile. Every sound made her jump. Every crack of a branch could be the men returning. She fell twice. Once over a root she didn't see. Once when her legs simply gave out. Both times she lay there for precious seconds, muscles screaming, lungs burning, wondering if she could get back up. Both times the puppy came back to her, licked her face, whined softly, waited, and both times she found the strength to stand, to lift the sling, to keep walking. Time lost meaning. The world narrowed to the next step, the next breath, the weight in her hands and the small shadow ahead showing her the way. Her father's voice echoed in her head, a memory from childhood. They'd been hiking and young Marlowe had complained about being tired. Pain is temporary, he'd said. Quitting is permanent. You decide which one you can live with. She'd been 8 years old. She'd hated him for it then. Understood it now. I'm not quitting, she whispered into the darkness. Not on them. Not on you, Dad. The puppy barked. Different this time. Excited. Marlowe lifted her head, squinted through the darkness and trees. Light, faint, artificial, in the geometric shape of her patrol car exactly where she'd left it. A sob tore from her throat. Relief so intense it was painful. They'd made it. She dragged Athena the final 100 yards up the slight embankment to the road. Her patrol car sat like a miracle, solid and real and safe. She opened the back door, lifted Athena inside with strength she didn't know she still had. The dog collapsed on the back seat, unconscious now. The puppy jumped in beside her, curled against her, keeping her warm. Marlowe slammed the door, stumbled to the driver's seat, collapsed behind the wheel. Her hands shook so badly she could barely grip the radio. She keyed the mic, held her breath. Dispatch, this is Unit 12. Do you copy? RTC static. She tried again, higher ground now, better angle. Dispatch Unit 12, emergency, need immediate backup and veterinary medical at my location. Do you copy? A crackle, then a voice broken, but there. Unit 12, this is dispatch. We copy. Stand by. Marlowe's head fell forward against the steering wheel. Tears came then, hot and fast and unstoppable. Relief and exhaustion and fear all mixed together. She'd done it. They were safe. Unit 12 units are en route. ETA 20 minutes. What is the nature of your emergency? Marlowe lifted her head, looked in the rearview mirror, Athena unconscious. The puppy watching over her, both alive. I've got 2 dogs, she said, voice raw. One critical, and evidence of a major crime. I need K9 medical and detectives. And dispatch. Go ahead, Unit 12. I need you to contact Pacific K9 training facility. Tell them we found Athena. Tell them she's alive. Silence on the other end, then quieter. Copy that, Unit 12. Help is coming. Stay with your vehicle. Marlowe set the radio down, turned in her seat to look at her passengers. The puppy's eyes gleamed in the darkness, reflecting the instrument lights. He looked exhausted, scared, but also relieved, like he knew it was over. The running, the searching, the desperate fight to save his mother. He'd done it. A 4-month-old puppy had walked into a forest, found a cop, and led her on a journey that should have been impossible. And now his mother was going to live. Marlowe reached back, let him sniff her fingers, then gently touched his head. You're the bravest thing I've ever seen, she whispered. You know that? The puppy's tail wagged. Once, weak but there. In the distance, sirens began to wail. Help was coming. Marlowe sat back, closed her eyes, and waited. The night pressed against the windows. The forest stood silent. And inside the patrol car, 3 survivors breathed together, bound by a journey none of them would ever forget. 20 minutes later, the quiet road erupted with light and sound. 3 patrol cars, an ambulance, and a large white van with emergency veterinary services painted on the side. Marlowe stumbled out of her car as paramedics rushed toward her. She waved them off. Not me, the back seat, critical condition. The vet team moved with practiced efficiency. They had Athena on a stretcher, within seconds IV, line-inserted oxygen mask over her muzzle. One of them, a woman in her 40s with steel gray hair, looked at Marlowe. How long has she been down? I don't know. Hours, maybe days before I found her. Blood loss. Significant, Gash on her flank, dislocated leg. The vet nodded, already moving toward the van. We're taking her to county emergency animal. You can follow. Wait, Marlowe said. She reached into the patrol car, gently lifted the puppy. He trembled in her arms, eyes fixed on his mother being loaded into the van. He stays with her. Please. The vet looked at the puppy, at Athena, back at Marlowe. Understanding crossed her face. He's hers. Yes. Okay, he rides with us. Marlowe carried the puppy to the van, set him carefully on the floor near Athena's stretcher. The vet team was already working, checking vitals, starting fluids. The puppy pressed himself against the stretcher nose, touching his mother's paw. Athena's eyes fluttered open. Found her puppy. Her tail moved, barely visible. The gray-haired vet saw it too. She looked at Marlowe with something like awe. She's been looking for him. For 3 days, Marlowe said. Through hell. She never stopped. The vet's expression softened. We'll save her, I promise. The van doors closed. Sirens activated. It pulled away, taking Athena and the puppy toward hope and healing. Marlowe stood in the middle of the road, surrounded by police cruisers and paramedics, and questions she didn't have energy to answer yet. Her captain was there demanding a report. Detectives were asking about the crime scene. Someone was trying to wrap a blanket around her shoulders. But all she could see was the van's taillights disappearing around the curve. All she could think about was a puppy who trusted her and a mother who'd refused to die. Her father's words came back one more time. Sometimes the job isn't in the manual, kid. No, sometimes the just was following a puppy into the unknown, believing when logic said not to, fighting when your body said stop, choosing love over fear even when it terrified you. Marlowe pulled the phone from her pocket, the one she'd found in the cabin, handed it to the nearest detective. Evidence, she said, and there's more, a lot more. But right now I need to follow that van. Those dogs need me. Captain Briggs stepped forward, older, grizzled, her father's friend. He looked at her with eyes that had seen too much and understood more. Go, he said simply. We'll get your statement later. Go be with them. Marlowe didn't need to be told twice. She climbed into her patrol car, started the engine, and followed the distant sirens into the night, toward an emergency vet hospital, toward answers, toward whatever came next. The forest fell away behind her. The cabin burned to ash miles back. The men who'd done this were still out there. But tonight she'd won. Tonight 2 lives had been saved. And as Marlowe drove through the darkness following the lights ahead, she felt something she hadn't felt in 6 months, since the day her father died, since the day her world had broken. Purpose. The emergency veterinary hospital sat on the edge of town like a beacon. White walls, bright lights, clean and sterile, and everything the forest hadn't been. Marlowe pulled into the parking lot 30 seconds after the van killed her engine and ran. The automatic doors hissed open. Inside the reception area was chaos. The vet team wheeled Athena past on a gurney, calling out vitals and terms Marlowe didn't understand. Blood pressure dropping, respiratory distress, possible internal bleeding. The puppy trotted beside them, refusing to be left behind, small paws clicking on the tile floor. A nurse tried to intercept him. The puppy dodged, stayed with his mother. The gray-haired vet from the van looked back, saw Marlowe. Keep him in the waiting room. We'll update you as soon as we can. Then they were through a set of double doors marked surgery, authorized personnel only, and Marlowe was alone in a waiting room that smelled of antiseptic and fear. She stood there for a moment, not sure what to do with her hands, her body, herself. The adrenaline that had carried her through the last 6 hours was draining away, leaving behind exhaustion so profound it felt like gravity had doubled. A voice behind her. You look like hell, officer. Marlowe turned. An older man stood near the reception desk, late 60s, maybe 70. White beard trimmed neat, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He wore a veterinary coat with a name tag that read, Dr. Gideon Frost, D.V.M. I'm fine, Marlowe said automatically. Dr. Frost's expression said he didn't believe her for a second. Come on, let's get you cleaned up while they work. He led her down a hallway to a staff break room, pointed to a sink, handed her a clean towel. Marlo looked at herself in the mirror above the sink and barely recognized what she saw. Her face was streaked with dirt and blood. Her uniform was torn, covered in mud and pine needles. Scratches ran across her cheeks from branches. Her hands were raw fingernails, broken and caked with earth. She looked like she'd been to war. Maybe she had. Marlo washed her face. Her hands tried to make herself presentable. Dr. Frost waited quietly, then gestured to a chair. Sit before you fall down. She sat. He poured coffee from a pot that looked like it had been sitting there since morning, handed her the cup. It was bitter and burnt, and the best thing she'd ever tasted. I knew your father, Dr. Frost said, settling into a chair across from her. Marlo's head snapped up. You did? James Quinn, good man, better canine handler. He brought dogs to me for years. Training injuries mostly, minor stuff, but he cared about those animals like they were his own children. A pause. I was sorry to hear about his passing. Something in Marlo's chest cracked open. She hadn't talked about her father with anyone who'd actually known him. Not since the funeral. Everyone else offered hollow condolences and changed the subject. But Dr. Frost had known him, had worked with him, understood what he'd been. He would have known what to do, Marlo said quietly. Out there in the forest, I was making it up as I went. Dr. Frost smiled. That's what your father did too. Every time. He just made it look easy. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Tell me about the dog. How'd you find her? So Marlo told him about the puppy in the road, the journey through the forest, the buried harness, the cabin, the crawl space, all of it poured out in a quiet rush. And Dr. Frost listened without interrupting, his expression growing more serious with each detail. When she finished, he sat back, whistled low. That puppy led you on purpose, knew exactly what he was doing. He saved her life, Marlo said. A 4-month-old puppy. He should have been playing with toys and learning to sit. Instead, he was navigating miles of forest to find help. German shepherds, Dr. Frost said with something like reverence. Smartest dogs on earth when they want to be, and the most loyal. He walked to the window that looked out over the parking lot. Your father used to say that dogs don't love conditionally. They commit. All in. No hesitation. Said humans could learn a lot from that. Marlo's throat tightened. That sounded exactly like something James Quinn would say. A knock on the door. A young technician poked her head in. Dr. Frost, they're starting surgery. They want you in there. Dr. Frost nodded, looked back at Marlo. That's my cue. She's in good hands. Best surgical team in the state. You try to rest. Can I see the puppy? Just for a minute. Dr. Frost considered, then nodded. Come on. He led her through a maze of hallways to a small observation room with a window overlooking the surgical suite. Through the glass, Marlo could see Athena on the table surrounded by people in scrubs. Machines beeped and hummed. Bright lights illuminated every detail. And in the corner, in a small crate, with the door open, sat the puppy. He was curled tight, watching the surgery with unblinking eyes. A staff member had given him water and food, but neither had been touched. He was focused entirely on his mother. We tried to take him to recovery, Dr. Frost said quietly. He wouldn't go, cried until we brought him back here, so we let him stay. Marlo pressed her hand against the glass. The puppy's head turned as if he could sense her presence through the barrier. His tail moved once, a tiny acknowledgement. He knows she's fighting, Dr. Frost said, and he's fighting with her, the only way he can. They stood there in silence for a moment. Then Dr. Frost squeezed Marlo's shoulder. Get some rest, officer. It's going to be a long night. He disappeared into the surgical suite. Marlo stayed at the window, watching, waiting, unable to look away. The surgery lasted 4 hours. Marlo spent it pacing the observation room, sitting, standing, drinking burnt coffee until her hands shook. Every time a monitor beeped, her heart jumped. Every time someone in the surgical suite moved quickly, she imagined the worst. She called Captain Briggs twice for updates on the investigation. The cabin had burned completely. Detectives were processing the area, but evidence was minimal. The phone she'd recovered was being sent to a forensics lab. The traffickers were still unidentified, still at large. "You did good work today, Quinn," Briggs had said. "Your father would be proud." Marlowe had ended the call before her voice could break. Through the window, she watched the vet team work. Dr. Frost moved with calm precision. Hands, steady focus, absolute. Two other vets assisted their movements, coordinated and efficient. And in the corner, the puppy watched, never sleeping, never looking away. At 2:47 in the morning, the machine's rhythms changed. Marlowe saw Dr. Frost step back from the table, saw him nod to the team, saw them begin to close the incision. It was over. Marlowe pressed against the glass, searching for signs. Was Athena breathing on her own? Had they saved her? The surgical drapes blocked her view. 15 minutes later, Dr. Frost emerged from the suite, pulling off his mask. His face was exhausted, but not defeated. "She made it through," he said. Marlowe's knees went weak. She grabbed the wall for support. "She's alive." Alive. Stable. Not out of danger, but stable. Dr. Frost rubbed his face. "The wound was worse than we thought. Infected. We had to debride a lot of tissue, and the leg was dislocated, not broken, which is lucky. We got it back in place. But Marlowe," he paused, met her eyes. "She'll never work K9 again. The damage to her hind leg, the muscle loss from the infection, the trauma. She'll walk eventually with physical therapy, but she won't run, won't chase, won't do the work she was bred for." Marlowe processed that. Athena, a dog trained for years, worth thousands of dollars, built to serve and protect. Reduced to a civilian life. For some dogs, that would be a mercy. But for a working dog like Athena, Marlowe wondered if it felt like a prison. "What happens to her now?" she asked. Dr. Frost's expression grew complicated. "That depends. She's property of Pacific K9 Training Facility. They'll make the call. Sometimes they retire dogs to handlers. Sometimes to approved civilian homes. Sometimes." He didn't finish the sentence. "Sometimes they euthanize dogs that couldn't work." Marlowe had heard the stories. It was rare, controversial, but it happened. The cold calculation that a dog who couldn't serve had no value. "No," Marlowe said sharply. "That's not happening. Not after what she survived. Not after what she did." Dr. Frost held up his hands. "I agree with you, but I'm not the one who decides." "Then who is?" "Pacific K9 will send a representative, probably in the next day or two. They'll assess her, review the situation, make a determination." He paused. "But there's something you should know, something we discovered during surgery." Marlowe's stomach tightened. "What?" Dr. Frost gestured for her to follow. He led her to a small office, pulled up a file on a computer. Medical records, photos, data Marlowe couldn't fully interpret. "Athena gave birth approximately 4 weeks ago," Dr. Frost said, pointing to an image. "We can tell from the physiological markers. She was lactating until very recently, and based on the surgical findings, she had a large litter. We estimate 8 puppies." Marlowe's mind raced. The cabin, the crates. They were breeding her. Illegally, yes. German Shepherds from professional canine bloodlines can sell for $10,000 to $20,000 each. More if they're already started in training. Someone stole Athena, bred her, planned to sell the puppies. Dr. Frost pulled up another file. "But here's where it gets interesting. 5 days ago, there was a federal raid, multi-state operation targeting illegal dog trafficking. They recovered 7 German Shepherd puppies from various buyers, all approximately 4 weeks old, all from the same litter based on DNA." Marlowe's breath caught. "Athena's puppies." Yes, the buyers had purchased them thinking they were legitimate, had no idea they were stolen and trafficked. The puppies were seized, are currently in federal custody at a foster facility. 7 puppies, Marlowe said slowly. "But you said she had 8. Dr. Frost looked at her meaningfully. "1 puppy wasn't recovered in the raid. 1 was still missing." The world tilted. Marlowe gripped the desk. "The puppy, Scout. He's the eighth puppy. That's my theory. I'd need DNA to confirm, but the timeline matches perfectly. 4 weeks ago, Athena gave birth. The traffickers separated the puppies at 3 weeks, which is criminally early, but common for illegal operations. They sold 7 quickly, probably trying to move the merchandise before they got caught. But one puppy, the smallest or the weakest or maybe just the unluckiest, got lost. Maybe during transport, maybe they dropped him, maybe he escaped. And Athena escaped 3 days ago, Marlowe said, the picture forming. After the raid, after her puppies were already gone. She went looking for the one they left behind. A mother's instinct is powerful, Dr. Frost said quietly. She was injured, weak, probably knew she was dying. But she tracked that puppy through miles of wilderness, found him. And when she couldn't get him to safety herself, she stayed close enough that when he went for help, he could lead someone back to her. Marlowe sank into a chair. The magnitude of it crashed over her. Athena hadn't just been running from danger. She'd been on a rescue mission. Everything she'd endured, the escape, the injury, 3 days of searching while bleeding and broken, all of it for one puppy, the one they'd forgotten. Does he know? Marlowe whispered. Does Scout know she's his mother? Dogs understand scent, family pack bonds in ways we can't fully comprehend. But yes, I think he knows. I think he's always known. Marlowe looked toward the surgical suite. Through the window, she could see movement. They were transferring Athena to recovery, and the puppy Scout was being carried alongside her, still refusing to leave. What happens to the other 7? She asked. Federal custody until the case is resolved. Then they'll be evaluated. Some might return to Pacific K-9 if the facility wants them. Some might be adopted to approved homes. Some might enter other training programs. Dr. Frost closed the file. But Scout, he's different. He was never in the trafficker's custody after the separation. He's been astray for a month. Legally, it's complicated. He chose me, Marlowe said. Out in that forest. He could have approached anyone. Could have waited for someone else. But he chose me. Dr. Frost smiled. Your father always said dogs know. They see something in us, something we don't see in ourselves. He stood. Come on, let's go check on our patients. Recovery was a quiet room with dim lights and soft blankets. Athena lay on a padded table, still unconscious but breathing steadily. Bandages wrapped her flank. Her hind leg was splinted and elevated. IV lines ran to bags of fluids and antibiotics. And curled against her side, finally sleeping, was Scout. His small body rose and fell with each breath, perfectly synchronized with his mother's. We tried to put him in his own bed, a technician whispered. He wasn't having it. Marlowe approached slowly, carefully, reached out and gently touched Scout's head. He didn't wake, just sighed in his sleep and pressed closer to Athena. They're both exhausted, Dr. Frost said. The next 24 hours are critical. If Athena can avoid infection, if her vitals stay stable, she'll make it. And if they don't, Dr. Frost didn't answer. He didn't have to. Marlowe pulled up a chair, sat down beside the table. I'll stay. You need rest too. I'll rest here. Dr. Frost studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. I'll have someone bring you a blanket and coffee. Real coffee this time. He left. The technician dimmed the lights further and slipped out. Marlowe was alone with the 2 dogs who'd led her on an impossible journey. She sat in the quiet, listening to them breathe, watching their chests rise and fall. And for the first time since her father died, Marlowe felt something she thought was gone forever. Peace. The sun was rising when Athena's eyes finally opened. Marlowe had dozed in the chair, neck crooked at an uncomfortable angle, waking every few minutes to check on them. When she heard movement, her eyes snapped open fully. Athena was awake, groggy, confused, in pain, but conscious. Her eyes moved around the room, trying to understand where she was. Then they landed on Scout, still curled beside her. The change was instant. Athena's whole body relaxed. Her tail, barely visible beneath blankets, moved. A weak thump against the padding. Scout woke to his mother's movement. His eyes opened, met hers, and he made a sound Marlowe had never heard before. Not a bark or a whine. Something deeper. Joy and relief and love all mixed into one small broken noise. He crawled closer, licked Athena's muzzle gently. She tried to lift her head, managed a few inches, and nuzzled him back. Marlowe's eyes burned. She looked away, giving them privacy in their reunion. But she couldn't stop the tears that fell. Dr. Frost appeared in the doorway, coffee in hand. He saw Athena awake, saw the two dogs together, and his expression softened. "Well," he said quietly, "that's the best medicine she could ask for." Over the next 3 days, Marlowe barely left the hospital. She'd gone home once to shower and change. Captain Briggs had put her on administrative leave, standard procedure after a traumatic incident. The investigation was ongoing. The phone she'd recovered had been unlocked. It contained messages, photos, contacts that linked to a larger trafficking network. Federal agents were involved now. Arrests were coming. But Marlowe didn't care about any of that. Her world had narrowed to one recovery room and two dogs fighting to heal. Athena improved slowly. The infection responded to antibiotics. Her vitals stabilized. She started eating small amounts. Physical therapists came to work on her leg, gentle movements to prevent atrophy. Athena endured it with the stoicism of a trained K9, but her eyes always sought Scout afterward, needing reassurance. Scout never left her side. The staff had given up trying to separate them. He ate when she ate, slept when she slept. When the physical therapist worked with Athena, Scout watched intently as if learning for her. On the fourth day, a woman in a crisp business suit arrived. Mid-40s, blonde hair, pulled back, carrying a tablet. She introduced herself as Jennifer Walsh, director of Pacific K9 Training Facility. Marlowe met her in a conference room. Dr. Frost joined them. "I've reviewed Athena's medical records," Walsh said without preamble, "and the police reports. What happened to her is tragic. The people responsible will be prosecuted to the fullest extent." "That's good," Marlowe said carefully. Walsh pulled up files on her tablet. "Athena was one of our best narcotics detection dogs. 3 years of service. Dozens of successful operations. She was on loan to a federal task force when she was stolen 6 months ago. We've been searching for her ever since." 6 months. Athena had been gone for half a year before she was even bred. "What happens to her now?" Marlowe asked, though she dreaded the answer. Walsh's expression was professional, detached. "Given her injuries and the prognosis, she can't return to active duty. Pacific K9 policy in these cases is to offer the day to the last assigned handler for adoption. If they decline, we seek approved civilian placement. If that's not feasible," she paused, "we make the most humane decision for the animal." "She's not being euthanized," Marlowe said flatly. "That's not the first option. But if her quality of life is compromised, if she can't function, we have to consider it." Dr. Frost leaned forward. "Her quality of life is fine. She'll walk, she'll play, she'll live a normal, happy life as a companion animal. She just won't work." Walsh nodded. "Then we'll pursue adoption. I'll reach out to the previous handler." She swiped to another file. "Now regarding the puppy." Marlowe's back straightened. "Scout, is that what you've named him?" Walsh made a note. "The puppy is Athena's offspring. Pacific K9 technically has claim to him as part of her litter. However, given the unusual circumstances and the fact that he was never in our possession, we're willing to be flexible." "Flexible how?" "If suitable placement is found, we won't contest custody, but he has excellent bloodlines. If his temperament tests well, we'd like to bring him into our training program. He could be working by age 2. "No, oh," Marlowe said immediately. Walsh blinked. "No, he's not going into your program. He's not being separated from his mother. Not after what he did to save her. Ms. Quinn, I understand you formed an attachment, but Scout has the potential to be an exceptional working dog. It would be a waste of his genetics and aptitude to place him as a pet." "He's not a commodity," Marlowe said, voice hard. "He's a living being who showed more courage and intelligence in 4 days than most dogs show in a lifetime. And he did it to save his family. You're not taking that away from him." Walsh's professional mask cracked slightly. What exactly are you proposing? I want to adopt them both, Athena and Scout. Silence. Walsh looked at Dr. Frost, who was very carefully not smiling. You're a police officer, Walsh said, not a K-9 handler. You have no experience with working dogs. My father was a K-9 handler for 23 years. I grew up around working dogs. I know what they need. Do you have appropriate facilities, time resources? I'll make it work. Walsh studied her. This is highly irregular. So is a puppy tracking his injured mother through miles of wilderness and convincing a cop to follow him into a criminal operation. Marlowe met Walsh's eyes. They belong together, and they belong with me. I'm not asking permission. I'm telling you that's what's happening. The room went quiet. Dr. Frost coughed to hide a laugh. Walsh closed her tablet. I'll need to discuss this with our board, and we'll require home checks references, signed agreements about their care. Fine. And if Scout shows aptitude, we'd like visitation rights to assess him for future training opportunities. No, he's not a resource. He's family. Walsh stood, extended her hand. I'll be in touch, Officer Quinn. Marlowe shook her hand, gripped firm. You do that. After Walsh left, Dr. Frost let the laugh out. Your father would have loved that. He had the same conversation with a bureaucrat once, told them where they could stick their policies. Marlowe's tension broke. She slumped in her chair. Did I just end my career? Probably not, but you definitely made an enemy. Worth it. Dr. Frost's expression grew serious. You really want this. It's not going to be easy. Athena will need months of physical therapy. Scout will need training, socialization, and you'll be doing it alone. Marlowe thought about the forest, about following a puppy into the unknown, about carrying a dying dog through darkness, about promises made in moments of desperation. I won't be alone, she said quietly. I'll have them. 2 weeks later, Marlowe carried Athena out of the hospital in her arms. The dog was still weak, still healing, but strong enough to go home. Scout trotted beside them, tail wagging, finally allowed outside after his long vigil. Cameras flashed. Local news had picked up the story. Puppy hero saves mother, the headlines read. Officer risks life in daring rescue. Marlowe hated it, the attention, the questions. But she smiled for the cameras because the story mattered. Because people needed to know about trafficking, about the evil that hid in plain sight. But mostly because she wanted the world to see Scout, to understand what real courage looked like. She loaded both dogs into her personal vehicle, the patrol car having been returned to the department. Athena settled in the back seat with a soft groan. Scout jumped up beside her, curled close. Marlowe drove them home, to her cabin on the edge of the forest. Small, quiet, but theirs now. She'd spent the last week preparing. Soft beds, food bowls, toys, a ramp to help Athena navigate the porch steps, a fenced yard where Scout could play safely. When she opened the car door, Scout bounded out, explored the new territory with puppyish enthusiasm. Athena moved more carefully, favoring her healing leg, but her tail was up, her ears forward, interested. Marlowe helped her up the ramp into the cabin. Scout followed, investigated every corner, sniffed every piece of furniture. Then he found a spot of sunlight on the floor and flopped down, exhausted from excitement. Athena limped over, lowered herself carefully beside him. And together, for the first time in their lives, they rested somewhere safe, somewhere permanent, somewhere that was home. Marlowe stood in the doorway watching them. Two dogs who'd survived the impossible, who'd found each other against all odds, who'd chosen her to help them. Her father's photograph was still on the table. She walked over, picked it up, looked at his face. I get it now, Dad, she whispered. What you meant. About commitment, about showing up, about loving something more than you fear losing it. The photograph didn't answer, but somehow Marlowe felt like he heard anyway. 3 months became a rhythm. Mornings started with physical therapy for Athena, slow walks that gradually got longer, exercises to strengthen her leg. She'd never run again, but she could walk without pain, could play gently with Scout, could live a full life. Scout grew rapidly. By 6 months, he was all legs and ears, gangly and awkward, and absolutely fearless. Marlowe enrolled him in basic obedience classes. He excelled top of his class, showing the intelligence and drive of his bloodline. But he wasn't destined for K9 work. He was destined for something else. Marlowe had applied to make him a certified therapy dog. Something about his story, his gentleness with Athena, his intuitive understanding of emotion made her think he'd excel at it. Captain Briggs visited once brought news. The trafficking ring had been dismantled. 17 arrests, Marcus Webb the ringleader facing 20 years. The phone evidence had been crucial. Federal prosecutors were building a case that would take down operations in 5 states. "And the other puppies?" Marlowe asked. Briggs smiled. "That's the good part. 2 were adopted by the families who'd unknowingly bought them originally, who'd fallen in love before knowing they were stolen. 3 entered K9 programs across the country, carrying on their mother's legacy. The remaining 2 are being trained as search and rescue dogs, their courage inherited from both parents." Marlowe felt her throat tighten. All 8 of Athena's children would have good lives. All of them saved. "There's talk of a commendation," Briggs said, "for what you did out there." Marlowe shrugged. "I was just doing my job." "Your job was patrol, not single-handedly taking down a criminal operation." He paused. "We'd like you back. K9 liaison position. Desk work mostly, but you'd be working with the training, evaluation, your father's old job, essentially." Marlowe looked at Athena and Scout, both napping in a patch of sunlight. "Can I bring them every day?" She smiled. "Then yes." 3 weeks after that conversation, a letter arrived. Formal stationery, Pacific K9 letterhead. Marlowe opened it with trepidation. "Officer Quinn, after reviewing your home assessment and Scout's developmental evaluations, the board has approved permanent placement of both Athena and Scout in your care. I must admit our initial concerns about separating Scout from his mother and placing him in a professional training program were misguided. What you've given both dogs is something no training facility could provide a family. Scout's intelligence and courage are evident, but so is his bond with Athena and with you. That bond is worth more than any certification. We were wrong to see him as a commodity. You were right to see him as family. With respect, Jennifer Walsh, Director, Pacific K9 Training Facility." Marlowe read the letter twice, then pinned it to her refrigerator next to Scout's obedience class certificate. A small gesture of reconciliation. An acknowledgement that sometimes policy needed to bend for compassion. On a bright Saturday in October, Marlowe drove to a facility 2 hours north, a federal foster center where the 7 other puppies were being held before final placement. Pacific K9 had arranged it. A reunion, all 8 siblings together one last time. Marlowe walked Athena and Scout into a large yard, and there they were, 7 German Shepherd puppies, 6 months old now, tumbling and playing. They stopped when Athena entered, went completely still. Then chaos. 7 puppies rushed toward their mother tails, wagging voices, crying out in recognition. Athena stood in the center, surrounded by her children, and her tail wagged harder than Marlowe had seen since the rescue. Scout joined his siblings, and they played with the wild abandon of young dogs who'd been given a second chance. Marlowe watched from the sidelines, pulled out her phone, took photos she'd treasure forever. Dr. Frost appeared beside her. He'd driven up for this, too. "Beautiful, isn't it?" "They're whole again," Marlowe said. "Even just for today. They're a family. Because of you. Because of Scout. I just listened when he asked for help." They stood in comfortable silence watching the reunion. Eventually, a staff member brought out refreshments. The puppies tired themselves out and collapsed in a puppy pile. Athena lay at the center, surrounded by her babies, and for a moment, everything was perfect. 1 year later, Marlowe stood in a different yard, a training facility. Scout sat beside her, no longer gangly. He'd grown into a beautiful adult dog, strong and intelligent and steady. The graduation ceremony for therapy dog certification was small, just a handful of people. Dr. Frost was there. Captain Briggs, a few other handlers and their dogs. When Scout's name was called, Marlowe walked him forward. He sat perfectly, accepted his certification vest with dignity. The crowd applauded. But Marlowe's eyes found someone else. In the front row in a special seat lay Athena. She couldn't walk long distances anymore. The arthritis had settled into her healing leg. But she was there watching her son graduate, tail wagging. After the ceremony, Marlowe brought Scout over to his mother. He touched his nose to hers. A moment of understanding passed between them. Then Marlowe loaded them both into her car. They drove home through golden autumn light, past the forest where it had all begun, past the road where she'd first seen a puppy who needed help. So much had changed. Her job, her home, her heart. All of it transformed by a single choice to follow when called. They pulled into the driveway. Marlowe helped Athena out carefully. Scout bounded ahead, checked his favorite spots in the yard. Inside, Marlowe made dinner for all three of them. Simple, quiet, perfect. That night, she sat on the porch with a photo album. Pictures from the past year, Athena's recovery, Scout's training, the reunion with the siblings. All of it documented, all of it precious. Scout lay at her feet. Athena rested beside her chair. The forest stretched out before them, dark and peaceful. Marlowe looked at her father's photograph, the one she'd brought outside. "We made it, Dad, all three of us." The stars came out, the nightbirds called, and Marlowe sat with her family, the one she'd found in the most unexpected way, and felt something she'd been searching for since the day she lost her father. Home. Not a place, not a building, but a feeling. The warmth of Scout's head on her foot. The sound of Athena's contented breathing. The knowledge that love, real love, meant showing up even when it terrified you. Especially then. Scout looked up at her with dark, knowing eyes. The same eyes that had begged her to follow him into the forest a lifetime ago. And Marlowe reached down, scratched behind his ears. "Good boy," she whispered. "The best boy." His tail thumped against the porch. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. Athena's ears perked to old instincts rising, but she didn't move. Didn't need to. Her fighting days were over. Now she had something better. She had peace. She had her son. She had a human who'd risked everything to save her. She had home. Marlowe sat there long into the night, three hearts beating in synchrony, three souls bound by a journey that had changed them all. The puppy who'd been brave beyond measure. The mother who'd never stopped fighting, and the woman who'd learned that sometimes salvation comes on four legs and asks you to trust what you cannot see. The forest kept its secrets. The cabin had burned to ash. The criminals were caged, but the love remained. Unbreakable, unconditional, eternal. And in the morning, they'd wake up and do it all again. Walk together, heal together, live together. Because that's what family does. That's what love means. And Marlowe Quinn, who'd spent 6 months running from grief, had finally learned what her father tried to teach her all along. You don't heal by hiding. You heal by loving something so much that the fear of loss becomes smaller than the joy of having them. And as the night deepened and the star wheeled overhead, three souls rested in the knowledge that they'd found what everyone searches for. They'd found each other. They'd found home. They'd found peace.